Coaching conversation. Coaching conversation. Coaching conversation. Coaching conversation.
Hello, people. Hello. See, this is what happens when I'm trying to be fancy without my without my tech support. My tech support and went and got herself a job, y'all. And so now I'm over here like I'm trying to handle things on my lonesome. But it's all good. It's all fun and for play. Anywho, come on in. Welcome to Coaching Conversations. My name is Jamie Alila, and I am an opera singer and a women's empowerment coach. And Coaching Conversations was born of my desire to provide a platform for some of the amazing women that I know and have made acquaintance with. Because, I just really believe that women are going to transform the world and that our voices have been stifled or silenced or suppressed or gaslit for far too long. So, I like to talk and I like to hear from people who I feel are very impactful and have something to say. So, Coaching Conversations was born. So today we are doing what we call pivoting. Our scheduled guest is not feeling well today. And so we send our love and positive vibes to her that she gets rested up and get back to 100%. And, it's all good because we can do what we want anyway, right? So I have decided to take today to have a conversation about imposter syndrome. So I want to reiterate that on Coaching Conversations, it's always a conversation, right? Like it's not just, I'm not an expert, on any of this stuff. I just, I've got a lot of curiosity and questions, and I love engaging with people. And so, that's what this is. So I invite y'all to come through in the comments with questions, with insights, with observations, with an amen here or there, wherever the spirit moves and leads. But so yeah, this notion of imposter syndrome is really interesting to me for a few reasons. So as a women's empowerment coach, I find this comes up regardless of the woman's vocation or background. This notion of feeling like an imposter in what she does comes up without fail with each and every one of the women, each and every client that I talk with. And then even was it this? I think it was earlier this week. Child, 2020 time is a whole different kind of time. So I think it was sometime earlier this week. I posted. I was inspired to just be like, "What y'all want to talk about?" Oh, that was a good smack. That was a very good smack. I'm proud of that, and I think it needs to be acknowledged. It's very hearty. But I did a post. I was like, "What y'all want to talk about?" And I was like, let me just kind of drop some ideas, and I welcomed some other ideas. And imposter syndrome got the biggest vote. I had people in my inbox like, girl, let me tell you what I am dealing with right now. And so I was like, let's talk about this because I know I certainly experience it, even in areas where others might consider me as an expert. Um, I feel like sometimes, like the hell you say, um, you know, so so I would love for you all. So this is gonna be real interactive because first of all, conversations require interaction, right? And also, like I said, we are pivoting. This is pivoting on today. Um, I don't have a plan. I don't have, really my objective for today is to just really to provide and create a space to normalize the feeling, and also to just kind of share what people's experiences have been. People can share and exchange things that have helped you all to come to to tolerate it, to even turn it around and to be empowered by it. Um, so first thing I would love to know is what is imposter syndrome to you? Add a banner. Let's see. Show the banner. There it is. What is imposter syndrome? Um, Drop it in the comments, uh, and let me know what imposter syndrome is. And what I mean by that is, you can drop a definition. Um, you can also drop examples of how it shows up for you, maybe in specific situations. If it has a physical manifestation for you, um, I want to share because I feel like I know for me. So I'll share it while y'all are getting in the comments. I'm gonna share a little story that's not exactly imposter syndrome, but speaks to this notion of the normalization of things and how empowering it can be. So earlier this week, I started the evaluation process for ADHD. And it's been something that, like, we've kind of joked about in my family because my family knows that I'm a very, very active person. Since the womb, I've always got something going on. I've always got to be doing something. And, even in parts of that, is accentuated by my personality. I'm very fiery and bubbly and energetic. Um, so, but and we did not have me evaluated when I was younger for a number of reasons. One, very high functioning. I'm, did well in school, do well in school, and um, have done well in life. And also, we know that it's only fairly recently that mental wellness um, is starting to lose its stigma, in terms of, like, having a diagnosis and having that be the thing that defines you and whatever. So, we wasn't playing those games in back in the day. And I was, like I said, I was cool. But what I have found as of late is that there are some ways in which my forgetfulness, lack of attention, um, anxiety even gets in the way of some of the things that I'm looking to do now that I'm older and now that I'm whatever. So I started to look into it and decided to get evaluated. And I'm taking this quiz, y'all, just like filling out these answers. I was like, yo, like this this is me. You mean this is, a thing that happens with people? Um, so, just to kind of reiterate this notion that there ain't nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Um, there might be some things that are different. There might be some things that are challenging. There might be some things that get in the way, but ain't nothing wrong with you. Okay, so let's see. Zanaya has come through. She says, I don't know that I know the technical definition, but I always kind of think of feeling like you don't actually have the skill set to do what you're doing or what you want to be doing well. Um, yeah, no, I mean, for sure, like this, one of the reels that plays in my head is, I don't know, like, I don't know enough. So there's this insatiable need to learn more. Like, I always have to be learning because I don't know enough, like you said, Zanaya, to be doing what I'm doing or what I'm attempting to do. So I need to go back and I need to learn more because I don't know enough. And then, and then just think about that. Like, if you're constantly, again, one of the ways it shows up for me with singing is I would constantly want to be practicing and cultivating skill more and more and more. And I had countless mentors be like, in fact, the first mentor who told me this was Ann Baltz. He was like, you got to get out of the closet and take it to the stage and perform. Like, some of these things that you're trying to perfect will not be perfected except for an actual application. And that was terrifying to me because I would want to be in the practice room and get it perfect before I let anybody see. And what she was telling me is that the only way to get this performance thing perfect is if you put it out in front of people. So that brings up this notion of like what provokes the imposter syndrome. One of the things that I just identified was this notion of fear, right? Being afraid. And, what is this fear? Okay, Valerie, AKA Mama, just said, we assume that everyone knows more than we do. And that's it right there, right? Like, I'm the only one who's sitting over here struggling with this thing or who doesn't understand this thing. And I'm looking at this person over there like they've got it all together. And one of the conversations that has started to come up is, do men and women experience this notion of imposter syndrome the same way? You know, I would presume, yes, assert that it is most definitely experienced differently, just because it's in Western culture, the way that um, gendered upbringing uh, plays a role. You know, men are taught to posture. Like, if you don't know, you better look like you know, and they will, right? They will, if they don't know what they're talking about, and this, of course, these are gross overstatements, right? Like, I definitely get it. Gross generalizations. Um, and generally, men are more inclined to speak with authority or with the appearance of authority on matters that they may not know about or might even be insecure about. Whereas women who have been reared, if you will, to be more quiet and to take the back, it's a risk even to speak up, right? It's a risk to speak up in a society that you know, doesn't think you have anything to say. So you better have everything together, because what's worse than being made to look incompetent in front of people, right? And now that's a story, that's a context. Because there are people, we got somebody that we all know very well who will sit his ass up in front of a television and or in front of a Twitter keyboard and speak boldly about shit he don't know nothing about, child, and will dare you to say something, right? So there's definitely, it's definitely a story that tells you that it's the worst thing. Let's see, Valerie says, there's the fear of being exposed, making mistakes, and feeling like the whole world is watching, right? And for many of us, that fear is debilitating. Like I said, but for some people thrive off of that. Donald Trump thrives off of being in front of the world, and he don't care in what manner. So there are people who are able to be out there, and to do that. So to be exposed, to be embarrassed in front of people, or to not even to embarrassment is my projection. To be exposed and to make a mistake in front of somebody, uh there are many ways to be with that, right? To be with this notion of making mistakes, because really what it comes down to is, what does this say about me? What will they, and this notion of the whole world watching, right? It comes out like, it's one thing if I make a mistake in the privacy of my own home. But if I do it in front of others, that variable can add something for many of us. You said incompetent. It's appearing to be incompetent. And for some of us, that thing is petrifying. I know that's one of my narratives inside. Whenever I'm being met with fear, whenever I'm being met with my survival mechanism that's trying to kind of keep me from something, one of the messages it'll say is like, you're going to look stupid. You're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. And for me in the past, that's been enough to stop me from doing whatever that thing is that is uncomfortable, because it'll make me look incompetent. It'll make me look like I don't know what I'm doing. Zanaya says, I don't think that men and women experience it the same. In my line of work, academic support, test anxiety, stress management, time management, etc., the vast majority of our test anxiety appointments are with women. I think it is very much connected to feelings of competence and a tendency to second guess and be unsure in life as well. So, Zanaya, I'm curious, and Valerie and Mom and anybody else who comes up, I'm curious to go back to this notion of how does imposter syndrome show up, or how does it manifest? How does it show up or manifest for yourself? Zanaya, for the people that you work with, how does it manifest? For me, I talked about these. I'm a very cerebral person, so I get in my head. I had a coach says something to the effect of the mind is a dangerous alley to travel alone or something like that. Um, because you know I you know I get in there and ruminate and such. And so as I mentioned, that there are certain narratives that'll come up for me when I'm bumping right up against my comfort zone. So if it's something that I don't know or don't know well, I'll start to hear messages. Um, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to look like a fraud. Oh gosh, that's a big one for me. Like looking like a fake, or coming across as inauthentic. Oh, that's the worst for me. I don't want that. So I'll start to have these messages that show up for me. Also, you talk about, Zanaya, the work that you do in test anxiety, and anxiety is definitely a way that it shows up for me, and it physicalizes for me. Like I feel a tenseness in my shoulders. I feel a tightness in my chest. Um, Literally like pressure in my head. Like it feels like my head will explode. So that's how it physically manifests for me. This notion of imposter syndrome triggers my anxiety, which then physically manifests in these ways. Um, so Valerie said that imposter syndrome first showed up for her in her first year of grad school. So that's two of these conversations around education. So even as we're getting information, even as we are getting knowledge, there's this sense of what being out of place, being incapable. I like to bring in this conversation around worthiness here too, right? Because the word imposter, like fake, like I'm a fake, um, and it usually applies in space and time, right? So if I'm in a space, if I'm in graduate school, and I've got this idea of who is supposed to be here, and I'm an imposter because I'm not them. So therefore, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not worthy of being here. It really is hard to pick a way that it shows up for myself personally. There are so many ways. As I'm listening to you, anxiety is definitely one of the ways. Yeah. Worthiness. Or they're going to see how imperfect or human or not 100% put together I am. It's so interesting. Just one of the things that I'm sitting with, especially as women, again, generalizations. These narratives that we're talking about, we, for the most part, would never subject others to this level of required perfection before engaging, right? Like Zanaya said, they're going to see how imperfect or how human or how 100%, how not 100% I'm put together. So, part of this imposter syndrome that I'm hearing is that it requires 100% from us, right? And also when we are working or being with others, whether it's family, friends, children, students, employees, colleagues, when we see them as imperfect or not 100%, we will rarely jump to they are unworthy of being here, whether it's unworthy of being in this job, unworthy of being in this family, unworthy of being alive. Like we will rarely go to that point if somebody shows up at less than 100%. if anything, from my experience, I find that that's when my empathy kicks in. That's when my understanding kicks in. That's where the humanizing kicks in, right? That really deepens the level of knowing and understanding of that person, right? So it's like, that makes sense. This person's not perfect. You know, they need whatever they need in this moment. Um, and I'm willing to allow that for them. And so I'm sitting here with that as, you know, as a possible approach for the self. You know, there's an example that's used for children, babies, when they're learning to walk. You know, as they stumble and figure out how these legs work, you know, they teeter and totter and might even fall over. And if they fall, when they fall, because they will fall. See, that's another thing too. We know for a fact that they will fall when babies are learning to walk because it's something they've never done before. So when they do fall, oftentimes we cheer and we, you know, we celebrate that they took the step, right? And then we do everything we can to encourage them to take more. So it's so interesting how we have that capacity within us to celebrate mistakes and struggle and challenge. Hmm. I was terrified sitting in the classroom with these brilliant professors at this level. I felt like I would look and sound foolish, and that I, with all of my passion and strong opinions, I was scared to speak out. So that's another way in which it shows up, right? Like when we start to act or behave in a way that is not our norm, right? So Valerie says, I'm normally passionate. I normally hold strong opinions. But what imposter syndrome does for me, what this fear does for me, is it silences me, right? I get scared to speak out because they are brilliant. They are at this level that I have placed them, right? Like I placed them on this pedestal and I'm not there. And so therefore, I'm going to look foolish. Rather than looking foolish, I will silence myself. So silencing, that's another way that imposter syndrome will start to manifest itself when we find ourselves unwilling to speak, unwilling to show up. And yes, it shows up when we are in unfamiliar terrain. Outside of the comfort zone, right? We get to that very edge of the bubble and this stuff starts teetering up. It starts teetering up, starts bubbling up, and it triggers our survival mechanism, right? So the it triggers the anxiety, it triggers the silencing, it triggers the shrinking, right? Try to hide in whatever way we can. So if I'm uncomfortable, I'm not going to draw attention to myself, right? Like if I'm a fake, if I'm a fake, a fraud, and a phony, I don't want you to see that. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to hide those attributes so that nobody will know, which reinforces this notion of being an imposter because now it feels like you are hiding a secret because you're actively hiding and suppressing your voice, your thoughts, your opinions, your questions, right? Like you are unwilling to seek what you don't know in those moments because that might expose you as an imposter. This is a great point. Valerie says, I was the first in my family to even go to college, right? So that's already going into that unfamiliar terrain that you mentioned, right? So that's already going outside of comfort. And you just spoke to what I was just about to get to, right? So you take that step out of this comfort bubble and it's different, but then, okay, just because you get outside of that layer doesn't mean that, you know, well, I think you say it best here. The higher I went, the scarier it was. The higher I went, the scarier it was. This is a good one. Who the hell do I think I am? Raise your hand if you've ever had that thought. Or you have the fear that that's what somebody is going to think about you, right? These people going to look at me and think, who the hell do I think I am? And the thing that makes it even harder is chances are you're not making it up. That's the thing, right? This stuff is not fake. It's not imagined. It's been experienced by somebody somewhere along the way. What it requires of us, though, is to be in conversation with it, right? So this narrative, who the hell do I think I am? Or whether it's inspired from within or whether it's inspired from without. Somebody actually voices or feels or thinks, or we think that that's going to happen. Well, we have choice in those matters, right? So within all of this, and I wanna provide this context with coaching. At the foundation, it's not about fixing something because there's nothing broken, right? Like there's nothing wrong. Like if I experience imposter syndrome, there's nothing wrong with me. It's something that I'm experiencing. It's happening, right? And so we normalize it by saying, yeah, and I'm not the only one who experiences this. Like I'm not crazy. It happens, right? Um, and being able to identify it is really empowering because it's no longer something that's happening in the dark recesses of your mind, right? Like it's something that you have and you put out there in front of you. Like, okay, so right now I feel like I don't know what I need to know. I feel like I'm not equipped. Right now I feel like, who the hell do I think I am? Put it out there, right? Then when we get empowered to be able to identify it, we are also empowered to make choices on how we're going to relate and interact with that, right? So a lot of times when we are met with things that are uncomfortable or unpleasant, we push that thing to the side. Like, nah, we're not going to do that. Who the hell do I think I am? Shut up. No, shut up, shut up, shut up. The thing is, it's not going to shut up. It's going to show up. It's going to pop up in the most inopportune times, right? And it's like, no, but I'm here to protect you. I'm telling you this because this is scary and I need to protect you from whatever it is out there, right? And so when we get to this place where we're able to identify what's happening with us, then we're allowed to choose how we go forward, right? So in this moment, right, Valerie says, the third child of 9, none in my family even expected me to go to college, right? So there's this conversation of never having seen it before, never knowing you had access to it, never having the support system to encourage you to do those things, right? Um, Zanaya says, not feeling like there's any room to make mistakes. Children are allowed that space to grow, adults not so much, right? So we've got all of these things in the way, right? We got all of these things in the way. And we develop techniques to survive and to protect ourselves. Valerie says, character is what got me as far as I could go to this point, right? So there were other mechanisms that you had created that allowed you to circumvent the doubt that was projected from within and without. You had enough within you to be willing to explore beyond what was known. And also, there are other boundaries and barriers and unknown. Like, as long as we live, there will always be areas that are unknown, uncomfortable, unfamiliar. And what I find is that sometimes those things that get us over this hurdle, and get us beyond this boundary are the very things that get in the way of the next hurdle, the next boundary. The technique you use over the technique you use to bike those 25 miles is not exactly going to be the same technique that you use to swim, however many more miles, right? And so it then becomes about being able and willing to consider another way, because we can again, this stuff is not fake. These things really happened or really didn't happen, right? You really were the third of 9 children with no one in your family expecting you to go to college. Like, that really was a thing. And we do know that having support systems in place are things that help to facilitate this growth, right? This is really, you said we just began this conversation. This conversation really stretches far and wide, right? Because in, I'm really immersed in this conversation around reparations right now, and how it's so much more than money, and it's so much more than can be repaid, because not only were my ancestors denied money and supplies, but also, you've got the children of white people who were consistently taught and supported and trained in such a way that says you are entitled to this, right? So you didn't get that training, that foundation to support you into going to college. These are all very real things, and it's reasonable, right? There's so much to talk about. No judgment, no solutions. Exactly. It's so reasonable to to be where you are, to experience what you were experiencing. And there is nothing wrong about any of it. And also, we have this opportunity at each stance, and we do get to choose at each moment. Is it time to engage with this? Is it time for me to go beyond this? Is this really protecting me from something? Because sometimes you are being protected from something. Sometimes it's not the time. And also, if there's something that I want to do and there's a block, there's something in the way, I can say, how am I relating to that? Is that in the way? Is that telling me that it's time to turn back and go back the other way? It's possible. Is this telling me this is not for me? Is this telling me, yeah, it's time to sit down and take a break? Is this telling me this is an illusion? And in reality, there is a way to get around this. We really are the only ones who have those answers at each moment. This is what I reiterate as a coach. Like, I'm not here to tell you the right thing to do. I don't have the answer for this is the magic pill to never deal with imposter syndrome again. Because as we talked about before, as long as we live, there will be new, uncomfortable, unfamiliar spaces in which to operate. And we are the only experts on our own lives. So, like you said, Mom, this provides a space to really open up the conversations, to open up the spaces to consider, to become familiar with what's even going on. Because I know personally, sometimes I get, like I said, when there's something that's undesirable, something that I don't want to experience, I was an avoider. Like, I'm not even gonna deal with this. So I would just be unfamiliar. I'd be experiencing these symptoms, right? The weight on my shoulders, the constricting in my heart, the pressure in my head. But because I was so unwilling to engage with them, I wasn't even aware of what was happening, right? These symptoms were telling me something that I didn't want to listen to. Let me see. It's also really easy to take failures as confirmation, or to take failures as confirmation of your doubts rather than a surmountable obstacle. That's it, right? So when we get to these things, it's like, oh, this must mean this, right? Whereas we have an opportunity, again, to create space, to be with it, and to really look within to get a true gauge of what this thing is saying. This didn't work. I failed, right? And even in the language, right, that we choose to use, this didn't work. What is this saying? What is this saying to me in this moment? And in each moment and in each opportunity, it can bear a different message. But sometimes we get so afraid of the message that we think is telling us that we'll either jump to that conclusion or avoid it altogether, right? I'm so afraid that the fact that this didn't work for me means that I'm not supposed to do this, that I'm either going to ignore that or I'm just going to jump to that conclusion. When in reality, there are almost an infinite number of interpretations that we only know the true interpretation of that thing when we allow our times the space and the opportunity, like Valerie said, without judgment. I'm just gonna call you mama. Everybody knows she's my mama, right? Because it just feels so weird. Like Mom says, when we have these conversations without judgment, that's when we permit ourselves to dig deep and to go there. Because when I say to myself, I'm not worthy, that does not feel good. Therefore, I'm not going to sit in that for very long. If I allow myself to say, that didn't work, it just is what it is. It don't mean nothing about me, don't mean nothing about you. It didn't work. So if I allow myself to go in that space, then I can let myself be curious. Okay, what had that thing not work? And I might get to the place where it says, yeah, this is not something I need to be doing. When I get to that place of making that choice from empowerment rather than shame or judgment or fear, that thing's got a whole nother thing on it. The notion that access is afforded to some and not others, that's ingrained in our collective psyche. And this, again, like we said, I don't have the answers. Like, I'm not an expert. This is a conversation though, and my area of focus is women. And so when we develop these ways of thinking from very real life experiences, how do we see another way? And that's my question that I'm putting out there, feedback, follow-up questions, whatever. I learned the term thinking trap for that. It's a defectiveness thinking trap. Thinking trap. Thinking trap. What was that in connection to, Zanaya? I think I missed it. Thinking trap. feeling like you're fundamentally flawed because of how, gotcha. Right, right. So because of how something turned out, this means this about me. Um, and that is something, that is a a tech a technique. That's something that I had conversation around, was that when we allow the separation of the event and the worthiness, right, or the being. So this is the event and this is who I am. And when you allow that space in between there, and you allow this thing to be what it is, this thing happened, period. Allow that to be a period right after that, rather than this thing happened, so it means, right? Which is allowed. This thing happened, period. That space, like you said, we don't allow enough space to recognize the impact of white privilege and Black inferiority and or gender bias has on our self-esteem. You know, and this is something that I've seen more conversation with this year, whereas before, what I would observe is that people who wanted to feel empowered, people who belonged to oppressed populations, who wanted to feel empowered, would avoid this space and this conversation for the sake of trying to avoid appearing or being a victim, right? Like, for the empowered person, for the powerful person, they don't want to feel like they're anybody's victim. So rather than feeling like being somebody's victim, I'm just going to deny it altogether. The challenge is it doesn't allow for the very real effects, right? And then I would suggest it further feeds into this notion of imposter syndrome, right? Because we're not acknowledging the oppression. We're not acknowledging the very real um, blocks that have been intentionally placed in our way. And we're fighting, hustling, and when you don't make it, it's because of a shortcoming in your part. If you happen to make it, it's tentative, right? Because again, the narrative that you've been told from the beginning is that by virtue of your gender, by virtue of your ethnicity, um, by virtue of your identity, you are not worthy of being here. Goes back to that conversation of worthiness. You are not worthy of being here. Whether it's a society that's been telling you that, whether it's a parent that's been telling you that, a sibling, whether it is something you picked up somewhere along the way. There's something that says you are not worthy of being here. And so the longer you are here, the more of an imposter, the more of a fraud you are, the more risk you are at of being discovered. Because at the core of it all, you are not worthy of being here. So it's essential to dig down to the core of the story that's driving all of this. And for many of us, especially those of us who are part of oppressed, suppressed communities, at the core of it is this narrative that has been ingrained in ourselves and in others that you are not worthy of being here, therefore you should not be here. And so when we identify that and we sit with that, I know for me personally, as I say that, it's like, okay. So I've learned and experienced enough to know that white supremacy is a lie. I've learned and experienced enough to know that masculine superiority is a lie. And if that is at the foundation of this thing that has been determining my worthiness, well, that just won't do for me anymore. I mean, and it becomes for me, it's like, so then this thing that I'm feeling a fraud about, what are some shifts that I can make in my perspectives, in the narratives that I tell myself about these things? Uh, what shifts? What are some new stories that can be told? Let's see. We're not talking about making it or not making it. I watched an interview with Michelle Obama where she said she still battles with imposter syndrome. Becoming, her book Becoming, she features that narrative so many times, right? She features that conversation so many times. She talked about how she would be in some of the most powerful rooms internationally, and she would feel like she shouldn't be there, but then you go behind the veil and you see these men, and it's like, Titi says something like, these men are not smart. These men are not smart. And so you're right. It's not about, again, this is not about, I have to be healed of or get rid of this notion of imposter syndrome. More so, it's about being able to identify when it's in place, right? Because this is one of those things again that comes up as you come to the edge of a comfort zone. This is one of these things that comes up right away. And so having the ability to identify it really places us in a place to where start to we can start to engage with it in a new way, where it doesn't have to be our defining way of being. It is a place that can, yeah, as Naya says, definitely putting me into a thinking space heading into work this morning. Yeah, it puts you into this space of being willing to consider another way. It puts you in a space of being able to recognize, there's something going on here, that it's trying to tell me something. Let's explore it and get comfortable with engaging with the conversation. That's it. It's really this that sounds to me like this notion of normalizing this notion of feeling this, of experiencing this imposter syndrome, normalizing that when I'm in a space that is unfamiliar, when I'm in a space that I've been actively told that I should not be in, when I'm in a space that I didn't even know existed, these are some things that start to come up for me. And when we normalize it, we allow ourselves grace. We allow ourselves to be in community. We allow ourselves to be able to experience peace even in the midst of it, even in the midst of the unfamiliar, even in the midst of the uncomfortable. Hmm. Yeah, it's not about trying to solve it. It's not about trying to solve it. Huh. So I'm just sitting here with myself with with this space that has been made in this conversation around imposter syndrome, and am curious, um, and I'm curious about, for others. Again, this is like Mom said, this is not about finding the solution. And also, I'm just curious about what can be taken away from this conversation and from identifying how this comes up. Michelle Obama example, a working class upbringing, a high school counselor telling her Princeton was not a good match for her. Exactly, right? Like she had somebody who actively looked her in her face, somebody, and this is it too, right? Somebody who it was her job to provide guidance and support for pursuing her dreams. And this person, I'll say, violated her trust by projecting her own bias. Because what was it about Michelle that told this woman that she was not a good match for Princeton? What was it about her? Because she got in, so clearly it was, right? So clearly her grades were there. She had the desire because she brought it up. So this counselor projected her own bias onto Michelle for whatever reasons, right? Be it race, be it gender, be it her socioeconomic background, to try to suppress and keep her in her place, right? So when you go around the gatekeepers and you make your way in, that doesn't make the imposter syndrome go away. In many instances, it makes the alarm go off, right? Like I wasn't supposed to be here. They told me I wasn't supposed to be here. Somehow I made it here. Point being that there's a lot of shit that goes into forming our identity, including our self-esteem. And that's it, right? Self-esteem, going back to this conversation of worthiness. So that when and she is able to identify, and she talks about often how it still affects her today because she's able to remember it. And also she was able to get to a place, whatever it was within her, to say, this is affecting me, but also I'm not going to allow it to stop me completely. And so to be able to identify that there's something that has told me at some point along the way that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worthy of being in this space, that I can't make it happen, and still being willing to say, but I'm going to do it anyway. And it does acquire a willingness to be with the uncomfortable, because it's not comfortable to feel like you're a fraud. Um, yeah, and that's why again, with this conversation, the ability to create space for yourself, for ourselves, to get curious about what it is that we're feeling, to get curious about the thoughts that run through our minds, and also to create the structure of support to counter or at least to challenge these narratives, to challenge these things that have gone into um, forming the basis of our self-esteem that might not be serving us anymore. Learning to navigate the dissonance between what you think about yourself and what you know about yourself. I love it. I love it. I love it. That's it. That's it. What I'm left thinking is, how can I connect the dots between what I see of people in real life behind closed doors when they are vulnerable with what we all present to the world? Nobody is all put together. Nobody knows it all. It doesn't matter what room we're in. It goes back to that humanization and the grace that we're willing to extend to others and to ourselves. There is no answer. Being comfortable with there not being an answer. Oh, Lord. And also, I mean, that's what allows us to progress in spite of our fears. That's it. That's it. And I'm finding that again with community, um, it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more comfortable to be uncomfortable, knowing that you got to support somewhere. Knowing that you got to support somewhere. Y'all, thank you. Thank you for joining me for this conversation. This again, this is not a hitter and quitter. This is not a one shot. Well, I won't use that one. This is not a one and done. Um, this I think this conversation around imposter syndrome, I think it's about continually um, developing and nurturing the space to challenge all of those false narratives that have gone into hindering, challenging, suppressing, creating the space, creating the community, and normalizing our thoughts, normalizing our feelings, and filling ourselves up to the point to where we can progress in spite of our fears, and filling ourselves up in a way that we know that it doesn't stop us. It doesn't have to stop us. These thoughts and these feelings of imposter syndrome do not have to stop us. It's normal, it's natural, and it doesn't have to stop us. All right, y'all. I have along these lines, I have an announcement that's gonna be coming up shortly. I when we've got the pieces together, I'm gonna put it out there. That is really intended to support these conversations and to create this space that's necessary to really go into not only conversations about imposter syndrome, worthiness, um, anxieties, all of these things that we're met with in our human lives and experience, to just really create the space to have these conversations and to create the support, to fill ourselves up and to keep us going forward in love and in peace. So that announcement is coming soon. But I want to thank you all for joining me for today's coaching conversation. And I'm not sure when the next one's gonna be. This is one of those things where I'm just allowing it to be what it is when it is. So when I get my next one up and going, I'm gonna let you know. But until then, y'all have a wonderful weekend. Bye.